So everything that Omar Khan has talked about to this point, and it's a great place to start, is everything we've heard and the continuous. Well, we have until May 2nd. We'll take all our time up until May 2nd, right at 4 p.m. to make that decision. Seems like the Steelers are not going to pick up Najee Harris' fifth-year option. Like, it's not going to happen, and that they've already decided that they're moving on, and maybe they'll try to extend him next year, and we're going to dive into all the bits and pieces to that. Doesn't mean that this is the end of Najee Harris. Doesn't mean that the Steelers have options to keep him next year, even if they don't pick up his option and cannot extend him. And why, really, there is a massive decision to make at running back just as a whole, because Najee Harris is not the only running back that the Pittsburgh Steelers have to worry about keeping under contract after the 2024 regular season. So just to lay out all the numbers here, Najee Harris's fifth-year option is worth $6.7 million. Frankly, not a lot of money for a running back, not a lot of money in general when it comes to the NFL. And if you have a situation where the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking at a cheap quarterback option, an expensive defense, but really a young and developing offense that isn't going to cost a boatload of money, $6.7 million is not a ton of money to toss at a running back and say, hey, you are our guy for at least another season. Now, on the other side of that, if you're just going to play devil's advocate, Najee Harris will be 27 years old when that fifth-year option kicks in. That's old for a running back. That's not a guy that you're looking at and saying, you definitely have tread left on your tires, enough to be a starter in the NFL. If the Steelers look at Najee Harris, I'm going to ask you this, if the Steelers look at Najee Harris and say, hey, look, we are willing to pick up your fifth-year option, but you may not be the starter in 2025, is $6.7 million too expensive for a backup running back?
It depends on who the second running back is. Are you picking somebody up out of the draft? In which case, sure, because then you're having a very cheap guy come out of the draft and you have a good 1-2 punch. And as we've seen, that's when the Steelers have been their most successful, when both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are able to run the football and able to get enough touches each other. That way they can actually get through the season healthy. And it's been very good for Najee. It's been very good for Jaylen, and it's worked for the Steelers. So I wouldn't be upset depending on who they bring in. Now, if they go out and they have to sign a free agent running back to go with Najee Harris, then it ends up being, $8-9 million, $10 million for two running backs and $6 million for your backup. That's when I would run into issues.
Yeah, I agree. I think at that point, you're paying way too much money for a running back. When it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and the decision of Najee Harris, I think it's that simple. It's, what is Jaylen Warren going to cost if you're going to re-sign Jaylen Warren? And is that the direction that you're going to go? And on top of that, if that's the direction you're going to go, are you looking at the options that come with Najee Harris? Because if you pick up Najee Harris's fifth-year option, and there I get the argument of you have to pick it up. Why, take the risk? If you could keep him and Jaylen around, why wouldn't you do that? I don't disagree with that notion. I think that that's the safe way to go about it, especially if this year works out and you say, hey, in Arthur Smith's offense, these two are dangerous. That's the way they should go about things. But if the Steelers are looking at it and they're saying it's pretty easy to find a running back in the NFL draft, it's not super difficult to not have to jump the gun, because they jumped the gun with Najee Harris. Najee Harris and Travis Etienne was probably the last, hey, these are first-round running backs, but maybe they're not first-round running backs, but you got to make sure that you get your guy running backs, at least for the time being. The Steelers now could wait till the second, maybe the third round, and say, hey, this is our guy. He's a starter. Or if he's not a starter this season, he's a starter next season. You could wait even further and get a backup to sit behind one of these guys. And then it comes down to making the decision that's, I think, more difficult than people want to admit, is, are you keeping Najee Harris or are you keeping Jaylen Warren? And I think the Steelers, their better option may be to keep Jaylen Warren. I mean, he's a more all-around running back. He's got less traction or less mileage on his legs than Najee Harris does to this point. He's probably going to be a little bit cheaper. I mean, what are you signing Jaylen Warren for? $5 million, $6 million, like a Miles Sanders type deal for 1 or 2 years. It's not a massive deal, but you're just giving him enough money that he could go out there and start and be your guy. And then if he proves to be the guy for a year or two, then you give him a, $10 million deal or something like that, and say, hey, this is an expensive one. We feel better about you as our starting running back. Here's enough money. Do you think that there's a market for Jaylen Warren next year that the Steelers are not going to be able to compete with? Or do you think that him being a backup in Pittsburgh, as long as he's been, kind of solidifies that, teams aren't really going to take a massive shot at this guy and give him, I don't know, $8-9 million next year.
I think the more likely scenario is that while even if Warren has a really good year, the Steelers are still going to be able to afford both of them.
Yeah.
Now, the one horrible scenario for the Steelers is they don't pick up this option. Najee decides, hey, I'm going to hold in, and he's not ready for the start of the season. And that allows Jaylen Warren to pop off. In which case, you have Najee Harris, who's wanting that extension. You have Jaylen Warren, who's pricing himself out. And that's the worst case scenario for the Steelers. But if all goes right and Omar Khan's plan works and they end up getting Najee on a half decent deal, I feel like they're going to use them enough that neither one of them is going to price themselves out.
Yeah. I think that if that's the situation, I agree with you. I don't think that I think in Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren's stock is pretty high. And I think there'll be other teams that are looking for a running back. They're going to say, look, we'll take a shot at Jaylen Warren to be our guy. We think Jaylen Warren could be a starter in the NFL, but they're not going to pay him a boatload of money. They're not going to pay him $10 million. They're not going to pay him $8 million. I think if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you could look at Jaylen Warren and say, hey, we could sign you. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jaylen Warren gets an extension this year. I wouldn't be surprised if Jaylen Warren's the guy that they ink to a 2-year deal worth, I don't know, $5-6 million a year and just say, we're going to keep you around for the next 2 years. We'll figure out Najee down the road. And that's definitely going to piss Najee Harris off. I mean, it piss anybody off if your backup is getting an extension and you're not. I think the 5th-year option, you bring up an interesting point with the hold in. I mean, if he signs a 5th-year option, he's making $6.7 million next year, but he wants an extension. Is he holding in next year? And if that's the case, you just picked up that option, guaranteed him $6.7 million to not play football. That's an even tougher spot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think there has to be some communication there. I think the Steelers have to have an understanding of, look at Najee, if we don't pick you up, what's this offseason look like for you? If we do pick up your 5th-year option, what's next offseason look like to you? Because we don't want to be in a situation where we're dealing with a running back controversy and some guy who doesn't want to be on the football field until he gets paid and we're not willing to pay him. Because I don't think the Steelers look at Najee past next season if they look at him at all. I don't think that the Steelers think that Najee Harris is a second contract running back, simply because, I mean, what are you going to sign him for? Two years, and then he's 29 years old when he's done. And I don't know. At that point, you're really taking a risk. Like 29 years old for a guy who's a physical running back, you are really looking at Najee Harris and saying, is he even going to be fast enough to get past the second level in the NFL by the time he's 29? And I think maybe there's a possibility he could. And I think maybe there's a possibility that his power is good enough to make that work. And on top of that, I mean, I've never met anybody who takes more care of their body than Najee Harris. But it's still the running back position, and you're taking massive hits all the time, and you're dealing with knee injuries last year, and that, I don't know. I think there's a risk associated with it, and I think it's pretty big when it comes to Najee. I don't expect them to pick up his option, but I do agree that if they do, it brings up a lot of question marks moving forward. And what are you going to do, guys? This is a public service announcement, and it is urgent. You think that you have mastered the look in sweatpants and joggers? Well, guess what, my friend? You have not. You are one step away from wearing pajamas in public, and your significant other is starting to think that you look like a slob. It's time to take your sexy ass and put it in some jeans. If you take anything away from today's show, it's that the perfect jean isn't just another pair of stiff, uncomfortable, nut-crushing pants. They have cracked the code on solving your denim difficulties, and it is time to rejoice. Check them out. Always looking good. The Perfect Jean makes great looking, perfect fitting jeans that are as comfortable as sweatpants and more stretchy than a kangaroo's pouch. It's made from a special denim fabric that's super soft, just like sweatpants, just like joggers, but it doesn't make you look like a slob. And the best part, they make 6 fits from skinny to thick. Waist sizes from 26 to 50 and lengths from 26 to 38. So whether you are a thick guy or a short king, or guess what, anything in between, they perfectly fit your body and accentuate your assets. Pun intended. Trust us when we say that these are truly fucking perfect jeans. Once you try them on, you'll never go back. Once again, Boom. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectgene.nyc, or just Google The Perfect Gene and use our code ALLSteelers15 for 15% off. Look it. I have been looking for a while. I have been talking to my fiance daily. I need to find a look. I've tried them all. I tried khakis. I tried joggers. I tried sweatpants. I tried shorts. Nothing fits me like the perfect jeans fit me. The Perfect Gene doesn't just stop there, though. They've revolutionized t-shirts as well. The Perfect Tee has just enough stretch to hide the beer belly while accentuating your arms and chest for that flawless look. It's soft like butter without shrinking in the wash like all your other t-shirts. It's just, perfect. The Perfect Gene always has free shipping, always has free exchanges, and always has free returns. So you can have peace of mind knowing that your order is completely risk-free. It's finally time to stop crushing your balls in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectgene.nyc. Our listeners get 15% off your first order plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use our code ALLSteelers15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectgene.nyc with promo code ALLSteelers15. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please, please, please give us some support and tell them that we sent you. Fuck your khakis and get the Perfect Gene. And at the same time, I'm not really opposed to Jaylen Warren being the starting running back in Pittsburgh next season. I'm not at all. I think Jaylen Warren deserves to be the starting running back this year, and him and Najee could work really well. And I honestly would not be surprised if the Pittsburgh Steelers went into 2024 and by the end of the season, Jaylen Warren was out touching Najee Harris. I would not be surprised by that at all. I think that in Arthur Smith's offense, Jaylen Warren works a ton. He catches a lot of passes out of the backfield. He could pass block, which is great for a guy like Russell Wilson. He could run inside and outside. He's got a ton of speed. I think if Arthur Smith's looking for that dynamic running back that can do it all, and you could utilize him in both the run and the pass game, Jaylen Warren might be your guy. You got to extend Jaylen Warren, and I think that might be a higher priority than keeping Najee Harris around. And then you go get maybe a rookie, maybe you sign somebody. Who knows? That's the other problem here, is that you look at next year's running back market, and it's Ramondre Stevenson, Nick Chubb, bunch of nobodies. It's a tough market to walk into and say that you're going to sign a running back for cheap and make that work. I mean, unless you're going to go get Nick Chubb, but even after the injury, what's Nick Chubb worth? $10 million, $12 million a year? That's too expensive for a running back. You're not paying that if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're looking to pay that total between two guys. I think if I had to guess, Najee Harris's contract is not picked up. Warren is extended either before this season or right after this season to maybe a 2-year deal. I would guess a 2-year deal. And the Steelers look to make Jaylen their guy moving forward and find somebody behind him. That makes sense, or am I kind of talking out of my butt here?
No, I mean, it makes sense. It's the way the NFL is trending is, and as somebody down here said, you don't pay running backs, you replace running backs. And that's what a lot of the NFL has been doing. And I think that really started with Todd Gurley. And you saw he went from being one of the best running backs in the National Football League to out of the league. And part of that was injuries, but that's what running backs end up going through in their career, that eventually, considering the stress that it puts under their knees, the stress that it puts under their lower body, eventually, it more often than not, they're going to deal with a lower body injury, and it's going to significantly impact what they can do for a team. So I would agree that you're right on base with the fact that they're looking at Najee Harris, a guy who is very similar build to a Todd Gurley, power back that has some explosion and explosives. But at the end of the day, they do have another option there. And then the NFL draft has always been, look at last year. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs went in the top 15, and both of them appeared to be worth it. Now, there were other running backs that went in later, and they also were able to be good backups, solid number twos. They could eventually become a number one. So it's the way the NFL is going, and it's unfortunate because Najee has given a lot to the Steelers the last 3 years, but it's just the way of the market, the way of the league, and it's unfortunate for that position, but it's the way it is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think look at like it's timed out wrong for Najee Harris, because if this is a year from now, if Najee Harris's 5th-year option has to be picked up next season and Saquon and Josh Jacobs, who got big deals this offseason, go out and have phenomenal years, the running back market is back. Here we are. You know, the money is being paid to these guys because there's value there. But it's a year too soon. You don't know what those contracts are going to be worth. You don't know if they're going to be worth the money. And because of that, you're not going to take a shot at a guy and say, yeah, we're going to keep you around. Who knows? This is a good question here. If Najee Harris isn't getting his 5th-year option picked up and Jalen becomes the Steelers' number 1, do you think that the Steelers use Najee Harris to strengthen deals? You know, Seattle, I don't think is a realistic option, but with the Denver Broncos. But even just in general, do you use Najee Harris to strengthen the deal? I would say the answer there is no. I don't think Najee's gone this year, no matter what, unless a holdout happens or a hold-in happens. If Najee goes into this training camp and he's nowhere to be found and the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't going to get their guy, and, you know, you're looking at it and saying, you know, you have to either pay him or get rid of him to somebody who's going to pay him. I think you have to go with getting rid of him. And you know, maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't think that it works. I don't think they put him in a deal unless he puts himself in a deal and says, I'm not going to be here in 2024 unless you pay me. Otherwise, I don't see the Steelers trying to like strengthen a deal with Najee Harris because they want both of their running backs, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's this entire season is going to be predicated on. They've bolstered up the offensive line. They want to be a run-first team, and that doesn't go anywhere if you get rid of a Najee Harris. I mean, Jalen Warren has been good, and I think as a number 2, he's more than, you know, just the scat back, because he does bring that power. He does bring that elusiveness. He brings a lot of yards after contact, but you do need that change of pace running back, and we saw it work last year where even when some people thought that, oh, Najee Harris wasn't having the best season, he went for over 1,000 yards again. He was able to have those games where he took over. It's important to have that dichotomy between the two of those guys, especially if it's a win at all cost season like it appears to be for the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This is Super Bowl or bust for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and because of this, you want all your key pieces, and Najee Harris is a key. Like, he just frankly is a key piece. Like, you could be a critic of Najee Harris, and there are a lot of critics of Najee Harris, but there's like a real possibility that Najee Harris is the best piece of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense in 2024. That he is the biggest contributor and a guy that makes or breaks whether or not this team is a Super Bowl contender or a playoff team. And that's crazy to say because he's not Derrick Henry, he's not Nick Chubb, he's only Najee Harris, but there's a real possibility that he turns into maybe not that guy, but he has such an impact on what this team does in 2024 that they just look at him and say, you have to do it. You know what I'm saying? Sorry. My phone was dying, which we use as my camera, and I had to plug it in and make it work. I totally forgot to do so before the live stream. I agree with that. I think there's a lot that goes into this. Again, I don't think that it's a situation that's going to work out in Najee Harris's favor, unfortunately. What that means moving forward, I think we'll have more answers to tomorrow after the Pittsburgh Steelers don't or do pick up his 5th-year option. But just speculating, I mean, you got to look at the situation and just say Najee might be worth $6.7 million, but the Pittsburgh Steelers might not be willing to take a risk on a guy that may be worth $6.7 million. And they might look at it and just say, we'll figure something else out. Maybe they believe that they could extend Najee for cheaper than that, which I think is wild. If Najee Harris is sitting around saying, yeah, I'll take $5 million a year. Like, no, you're not. Like, you're worth more than $5 million a year. I could also see him saying, hey, look, I could go to another team that's a better Super Bowl contender and make an impact. I just think there's a lot of possibilities there on where things go down and how this plays out. But again, we'll find out at 4:00. I don't expect it to happen, but you never know.